Settle down, brother. This is the Quarter Report powered by ENCA.com. South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party. Day one of the Madlanga Commission. I'm so glad that we on the TV show on Monday decided to call it Madlanga Madness because it turns out even day one was mad. So mad that I've now got a list of all of the things that we need to cover today. We need to talk about Terry Motau's suit. We need to talk about how the police get undermined from within the criminal justice system, within the security services in a way that I think lots of South Africans, ourselves included, don't fully appreciate and understand. We need to talk about the political process failings that caused Mkhwanazi to then decide that he would do that now iconic press conference in July. We need to talk about the fact that it wasn't just ANC people in parliament, it wasn't just this committee or that ad hoc group, it was a collection of politicians from different parties who Mkhwanazi tried to speak to, and they all failed him. So all of the people now saying on the kind of like Julius Malema line that, he should just go through the due process and the proper process and go through parliament. He already tried to do that. We're going to talk about that. Since the 121 dockets were returned back to the political killings task team, people have already been arrested. We need to talk about Matlala, who is going to be involved in this commission, being denied bail, and so much more. We're going to get into all of that. Right. The only place to watch the show in full, as you know, is on ENCA.com. If you're watching on YouTube right now, click on the link in the description and go across there. But if you are watching on YouTube, also give us a like and a subscribe. Go get some of our merch at www.3beaniesnetwork.com. This is merchandise! Because Eric always gets touched that I lean away from the microphone to show the merch. So today, I'm just wearing it. What was interesting about day one is that there was a lot of him reaffirming what he'd already said in that July press conference, but there was a lot of interesting stuff that I think didn't make enough news that deserves to deserves to be spoken about. Credit to a variety of different journalists who've written brilliantly on this, particularly Bernadette Wicks and Karen Morn from News 24. I want to start with how the police gets undermined. This was really interesting yesterday because one of the big contentions about the KZN political killings task team, at least from Mkhwanazi's perspective of powerful people, is that it went to Gauteng and helped the Gauteng police to investigate the murder of a man called Armand Swart, who was an engineer at a Vaal-based company called Q-Tech. And there was very, very, very explicitly some dodgy, shady business going on in there with tenders. Basically, as Wicks and Morn wrote yesterday, Swart was gunned down 2 weeks after Q-Tech, the Vaal-based engineering firm he worked for, raised the alarm on price gouging on a Transnet contract, which had seen springs it manufactured and sold for R3.20 a piece being sold onto the parastatal for 152 Rand each. 320 to 152 of your best South African rands, which is crazy. And so that was one of the cases that the PKTT was investigating, the task team was investigating, and Mkhwanazi detailed how evidence and analysis of evidence that they needed to get back from other parts of the police service was not coming back or coming back incredibly slowly. And that might undermine their attempts to investigate. And then one of the people involved who were arrested for the crime, whose name is Michael Pule Tau, who's actually a former Johannesburg detective. Basically, he was released on bail under really shady situations. And after that, Mkhwanazi speaks about the fact that a lot of the senior detectives and investigators from the PKTT, they were offered bribes and also threatened. So essentially, don't investigate this, don't oppose bail when the application comes in for bail for Tau to get out, and also we'll give you money. So it was like very, very much terrible things will happen to you if you don't do what we want, and if you make the bail application difficult and you pursue this investigation, but also here's money to sweeten the deal for you to not get in our way, which I found interesting because we've heard a lot about political interference. We've heard a lot about, say, Mchunu trying to get Shadrack Sibiya to take away the dockets and shut down the political killings task team. But this is actually how within the police service, investigations can be derailed and it can become dysfunctional because you are relying on different people working over the forensic evidence, different people validating and affirming different kinds of evidence, and different people basically contributing to the investigation. You're relying on all of them to do their jobs competently and quickly, not be compromised or have other kind of agendas, not be intimidated and threatened to the point where they won't do their jobs out of fear, and obviously not take bribes And then the next thing I found really interesting from yesterday was the political process failing. So if you are watching or listening to the show for the first time this week, you may have missed this, but like a huge contestation, many of them from like Julius Malema's supporters amongst others, and also the MK party now saying that the Madlanga Commission is a colossal waste of money, is that Mkhwanazi should just go to the ad hoc committee and he should have followed, Mchunu says that he should have followed due process in the first place. And Mkhwanazi made a real point of saying, I did do that. I messaged Senzo Mchunu and I asked for a meeting. It didn't happen. I messaged Fani Masemola about something. Fani Masemola was on leave. I messaged and I contacted all of these different people in different parts of our political system to say, I need to talk about the stuff that is not working. And they didn't get responses back, which eventually led me to doing this now extraordinary press conference. That was a last resort that I wouldn't have done if any of these other things had worked. And just in case you're thinking, well, that's just Senzo Mchunu's people and ANC people not wanting to listen to a cop saying that something's going fundamentally wrong in the criminal justice system and in the policing system that the ANC ultimately is responsible for because of its majority rule of South Africa since 1994. Mkhwanazi literally said, and this is again in Karen Moorn's words from her live updates from yesterday, Mkhwanazi says he then reached out to the chairperson of Parliament's Police Portfolio Committee, Ian Cameron. While he expressed his unhappiness over the PKTT disbandment to the Portfolio Committee, nothing came of his concerns. Now, I don't think Mkhwanazi said enough there to necessarily suggest that Ian Cameron did nothing. But the point is that Mkhwanazi was talking to all of these different politicians, including politicians from different political parties within the GNU, and getting nowhere. And ironically, the fact that Mkhwanazi's appeals fell on deaf ears now means that we have a commission of inquiry that I think is going to do a better job of exposing the rot than Parliament would have done, right? Because in Parliament, there are a lot of different things happening. There are a lot of explicit political agendas of different parties trying to push different narratives. Anything that happens in Parliament is fundamentally more contested. Remember the VAT budget. Remember how, depending on which politician you asked, it was a completely different read of whether or not it was good or bad, whether or not Action SA and others had screwed up that like pre-meeting to approve a fiscal framework, whether or not there was actually a budget increase or not, whether or not it was good to support it or not, whether or not all the smaller parties are doing the right thing or not, whether or not, like all of that hubbub and noise and cloud would have happened with Mkhwanazi's stuff if they had taken him seriously in Parliament in the first place, and probably would have led to a less transparent, less exposed, less effective process than what I'm certain already from just day one the Madlanga Commission can provide. So it's a very horrible silver lining. Like, you would rather not that was the case with our Parliament. But frankly, I think that this is better. This is better. And again, before people get touched, he must also go to the ad hoc committee now in Parliament. He must also do that part. But what I'm saying is the fact that we now have a commission is, in my opinion, better than if all of this had become fundamentally politicized and twisted up in narrative in Parliament 3, 4, 6, 7 months ago. Because if we had a situation of Ian Cameron is shouting at Senzo Mchunu and MK shouting from elsewhere and like EFF people are shouting from elsewhere, then like it becomes hard to rely on and really see what is going on. Then the other thing that General Mkhwanazi said, so we've been talking about all of these 121 dockets. They've been very controversial. They were the political killing task team's dockets that were then taken away by Shadrack Sibiya. And Mkhwanazi actually explained how he basically came to realize that Sibiya was not, or at least nothing was being done with those dockets. He said he was getting complaints from the victims of people who'd been killed about the fact that they weren't hearing any more about the investigations. And so he came to realize that nobody was working on those cases. And you'll remember the rumors that many, or like at least a handful of those dockets of those 121 had arrest warrants in them, which meant that the investigations were at such a point that people were like, should be arrested. There was enough on them to put out warrants for their arrest. And that's really significant because it means if the dockets are taken away, it means you are actively stopping the arrest of people for which the PKTT, the task team, believe that they have enough evidence to justify arresting those people for being involved in the political killing of people. Very, very significant. And so it was really interesting and important yesterday when Mkhwanazi said the dockets were returned to us, or at least to the political killings task team by Fani Masemola just a few weeks ago. And already since then, there have been arrests. Now, I've got no reason to disbelieve him. If that is true, those arrests could have happened in March. But the other thing that's really important is a lot of South Africans have been, I think, justifiably worried about what if all of these dockets were tampered with when they were sitting in Sibiya's office. And Mkhwanazi himself, the man most invested in these dockets being the same as they were in March when they were taken away, said there were some small amendments and additions, but ultimately, according to their investigations, those dockets are still sound. And that's really important because those dockets are going to be key evidence in this commission, as well as ending up in arrests in KZN and elsewhere. A lot happened yesterday to evolve our understanding of all of these key crucial parts. And at exactly the same time, Vusimuzi Kat Matlala was denied bail. Again, if you have just woken up from an incredibly long coma, Vusimuzi Kat Matlala is in jail right now. He's deeply implicated. Go watch all of our other shows or listen to them. I can't do it again, but he's deeply implicated in all of this. He's a tenderpreneur who's inappropriately connected to a lot of people, including Becky Hele and others, Brown Mogotsi, Senzo Mchunu, and all of these other big figures. And he is in jail right now on charges of attempted murder of his ex-girlfriend, Tebogo Tobayane, defeating the ends of justice, and money laundering. And he also, while he was in jail, had a cell phone, which has now got all this incriminating evidence of it, connecting him to very powerful people, including the fixer Brown Mogotsi and others. We will definitely get into more of this as we continue to cover the commission in the coming days. So he is in jail. He was denied bail yesterday by the Alexandra Magistrates Court, which is really significant. In fact, the quote from Magistrate Prinsloo was, "The applicant has failed to demonstrate that he does not pose a flight risk. The nature of offensive represents a clear danger to the community. The state's case cannot be described as weak." So that's interesting because in three different ways he was denied, right? So one, the state's case is strong. We're not going to give him bail. Two, he might actually be a flight risk. He might be able to leave the country, which is one of the main or like the most crucial things to consider before you give someone bail is, will they be able to hop it and leave the country? And then the third one, the nature of offenses represents a clear danger to the community. What that means is what he's allegedly done, and again, the state's case cannot be described as weak, means that he is actively dangerous when he comes out. We know that Tebogo Tobayane is living in fear, that at times she's lived in hiding. What the magistrate is saying there is Kat Matlala is still really dangerous. It's not that he did really dangerous things. It's that he's still dangerous right now and presents a clear danger to the community.